Let me take a step back and a deep breath, because this is a very painful thing to talk about. So all over the world, we know, it's well established, the State Department and intelligence agencies engage in theater, and it's what they do, it's spycraft, to create spectacles and events that people may not realize are spectacles and events, but that, well, like the overthrow of Mossadegh in the 50s in Iran. They'll funnel money to protesters, they'll, fly people in to infiltrate protesters, they'll create fake newspapers, and so on. So now that it's illegal to propagandize in the United States, it doesn't surprise me that there's more and more products coming up in popular culture, more and more events in the news stream that seem to be, to my eye, to be subsidized. Let me give you some examples of that. I'm not talking about Boston right now. I'll get to that. We also talked earlier about infiltrators, right? And how they provoke violence. This is well established. So if we know that infiltrators by the police, NYPD, they've been documented, or other police forces, dress up like people they're not and provoke violence, why is it unthinkable that there might be spectacles that might drive an outcome in the news stream? Let me give you a couple of quick examples. And all I'm saying is we, unfortunately, and I have to say this to my fellow journalists as well, we've entered a time in which we need to be very skeptical about the news stream and look at it critically and ask for more verification and more inquiry. And that's just being good reporters. And it makes it like this, there's spectacle fed into the news media in China. There's spectacle fed into, like Chile. How did Pinochet, engage in his coup? He created photographs of a cache of weapons that the terrorists had, hidden. Was it real? Was it not? Most historians think it wasn't. I mean, this is like not unusual, in the process of creating a closed society. I'm skeptical of certain news events that seem more theatrical than the norm, or I want to ask questions about them. All this nonsense can enter the media stream for purposes that have to do with advancing agendas, because no one's checking. That's all I want to say about that. Can I take more questions? So Boston, I guess my feeling about any of these things is, let's investigate. We need to investigate. We need to ask better questions. We need to interview the doctors at the hospital. We need to interview the victims. We need to, get all the footage ourselves. We need to train citizens to be journalists and to have websites. And I'm busy building one as a startup where citizen journalists can document events so that we're not leaving it to the gatekeepers. What happens in a closed society is people's sense of their right to be free gets undermined. And then they forget, right? They forget to want to be free. And the Department of Homeland Security has sort of systematically militarized and privatized domestic police forces throughout the country. Many of you are aware of this. So millions of dollars in tanks and heavy armaments and the kind of equipment you use in a war, weirdly, are being transferred from DHS to little police stations in little towns all over America. And I've really, moved on this, because now I still hate gun violence, of course, but our government is at war with us. And now they're killing us. And the founders wrote the Second Amendment because they too were facing a government that was at war with them and killing them. And that's where we are. That's the truth of where we are. And I believe that this, insistent assault we're seeing right now on taking away gun rights or restricting gun rights. I hate guns. I wish they didn't exist. I wish we didn't need them in the United States. But when the government is at war with you, I do think the founders' wisdom that citizens have to be able to defend themselves is profound. In the media, and now in Britain, you're seeing a lot of hyped stories that don't check out when you report them out properly. that are designed to scare you in Britain to death so that you give up your civil liberties, which is going on around the world. In Australia and Canada, same laws are being passed in the United States to crush civil liberties, make protest harder, crack down on free assembly, and also to in the name of terror fighting, allow the government to do whatever the hell it wants with your privacy, with your freedom, and make a bunch of money for not you. So I guess there are a number of ways. I mean, I'm very passionate about citizen journalism because if you teach people how to be good journalists and avoid rumor and document things with double sources, you take away the writing of history from the gatekeepers who are increasingly owned by the same people like General Electric who profit from endless war. But I think also just don't believe anything you're told, find out for yourself. And what I mean is with Islamophobia, for instance, this is correct, and that's true of anything you're being sold. I think also studying how propaganda is created, like reading, is it Edward Bernays, the great analyst of propaganda, is really helpful. Over time, you just kind of immediately recognize when something needs more verification, and then just see if you can find two independent sources. That's the beauty of the internet. I mean, I got attacked recently quite fiercely for questioning or saying that the ISIS beheading videos had not yet been verified. That's not the same as saying they're fake. It's saying they're not yet independently verified. The only source for them, early on at least, was this very questionable site called Site, S-I-T-E, which gets $500,000 from the United States government a year and is run by these Islamophobe establishment types who are connected to the global, the sort of US anti-terrorism establishment. So if it exists online, there's one internet, you should be able to find it independently. But no one could find it except through this. So to me as a journalist, that's not good enough. And increasingly, you're getting reporting from major news outlets that will, and you should learn to do this, read the text carefully. Like the Times today, they'll quote government officials saying ISIS is using welfare benefits to fund jihad. So that's an open door to, grab all of your privacy, get into your homes, etc. But do they have an independent source? Do they have anyone else confirming it? What's their evidence, right? So even major media is going with single sourcing now, or government officials, where classical journalism is two independent sources. So you need to be the journalist, is what I